The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL. You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Peter Bukowski, Locked On Packers, Matt Derry, Locked On Lions, Ford Field, Thursday night for Detroit and Green Bay. Give me some keys, Pete. What are you looking at that will make the Packers split this season series?
The key to me is turnovers. If the Packers win the turnover battle, and in this case, that means forcing a turnover from this offense, it is everything against this Detroit Lions team. When they turn the ball over, they are 16 points per game worse than when they don't. They average 40 points per game when they don't turn the ball over. That is an absurd statistic. Now, that's also colored by the fact that, they turn the ball over a billion times against the Texans and still won, right? Like they can win even when that happens. But the Packers are not the Texans. They're a better football team. Jordan Love is a better quarterback than CJ Stroud. I don't know what other evidence you need to see. Watch the games, please. But that's the key to me, because I threw this out on social media, on Blue Sky, on Twitter. I posted the box score, and I said, from the last game, and I said, tell me who you think won this game. And the overwhelming response was the team on the left, which was the Lions, by a touchdown. Now they win by 10, right? But the narrative was that was a blowout, that was a domination, that the Packers were down 3 scores into the fourth quarter. And that the last part is of course true, but it was the one turnover that became a touchdown that really decided the game. That's the difference in the game. And so
that was a killer.
If you don't do that, the Packers held the Lions defense, or the Lions offense, to 17 points, under 5 yards per play. I understand it's a monsoon, but who runs the ball on opponents when they're up better than the Lions? No one. So, and the idea that they took their foot off the gas when they throw halfback passes, and they're throwing, like they ran Penei Sewell on a reverse pass last week, Matt. The idea that they would take their foot off the gas against the Green Bay Packers when Amon-Ra St. Brown wears a Green Bay sucks t-shirt to the arena.
Yes.
Give me a break. The Packers defense played really well in the second half of that game. They kept them in it. I think that the turnover piece of this, if they can just create one and don't turn the ball over, that's the key to me. What about you?
First of all, that Green Bay sucks t-shirt, I did say on my show that night that shirt was kind of lame because it was misspelled.
Yeah, Green Bay is 2 words, guys. Correct. Just so we know.
Correct.
And we do need to mention, Xavier McKinney was asked about that at his locker yesterday. He said, we're not worried about Amon-Ra St. Brown, or he said, we're not worried about that dude. I don't think he meant like we think that guy sucks. No. I think what he meant is we're not worried about him trash talking. We're not worried about what t-shirt he's wearing. Like, we're focused on the game. And that is true, Matt. I have to just give your audience a little bit of insight here. I've mentioned this on our show. This Packers team, by all accounts, in that locker room this week is locked in. They are dialed to this matchup. And so they truly are not worried about any of the external stuff. They are focused on winning a football game. This is a business trip to Detroit. And I think that is part of this too. You have to meet, if you want to beat the Lions, you have to meet their focus and their precision, because right now this is the most focused and precise team in the league. A credit to Dan Campbell and those coordinators. I stepped on your key. Please give it.
Well, no, 2 things. Number one, red zone defense, which we talked about before. The Lions have been so good.
Elite. Yep.
They're holding the Packers to field goals.
1 for 4 in the last game, the Packers in the red zone scoring touchdowns.
Yeah. Well, they were all split. I mean, the Dolphins never win I actually was dumb enough on our Locked On NFC show last week, which we missed you, by the way. I said something like, I think the Dolphins finally do it. I was like, that was the dumbest prediction of all. That's number one. So
at the end of the first quarter, you're like, crap.
I know. And then number 2, remember this name, Al-Qadin Muhammad. Many people don't know who that is. All right. But they're going to need him to rush the passer, because I think the Packers are going to know where Zadarius Smith is. Aleem McNeil is who he is. He's amazing and a beast. But they need some pass rush from Muhammad. like they got last game, just off the edge because of all the guys that are gone, all the guys that are hurt. Sounds like Pascal's not going to play. So Muhammad becomes a guy that has to game wreck a little bit, because if Jordan Love has time and was comfortable a year ago at Ford Field at Thanksgiving, Lions couldn't touch him last Thanksgiving, and he lit him up. So those are two big things for me: is holding Green Bay to field goals and getting some pressure on Love. Muhammad will be key to be one of the guys that does that. So
the red zone defense is if it was not going to be turnovers, that was going to be mine, because I mentioned that 1 for 4. I wrote about this earlier this week for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for everyone to subscribe to. That if you look at what happened in those red zone trips, the Packers miss Chris Brooks wide open on an angle route. Jordan Love, passes a little behind him. Josh Jacobs probably makes that catch. He might walk in for a touchdown. They have to settle for a field goal. Then Jordan Love misses Christian Watson on a first down play, and then Elton Jenkins throws the ball at Jordan Love's feet. The backup, he's the guard that had to play backup center. They have to settle for a field goal. And then Dontavian Wicks on 3rd and 1 drops the pass. They go for it on 4th down, and Josh Jacobs gets stopped. That's the game. That's the whole game. Is those 3 possessions in the red zone. And I think the Packers are going to have a better plan this time around. I don't think they're going to drop, depending on where you look, 8 passes. They had 4 dropped 3rd downs alone that would have given them first downs. I think you're going to see a focused Packers team. And I think this is going to be much like last year, where these two teams split. I don't think there's that big a difference, especially right now with the way the defense is. I think this is like a 27-24 kind of game, a 30-27 kind of game. And I think Green Bay gets it done. I think they have the right mindset. This is I think it's gonna be a really, really good game, a potential classic here coming on Thursday night.
I'll say this, Kirby Joseph will get an interception. You know, he always makes a play against Packer quarterbacps. Doesn't matter who they are.
He sure does. Packers might have to bring in Malik Willis just to avoid it, just to see if they can switch the juju up.
I'm going to surprise some people here. I'm going to take Green Bay.
Wow.
And I know it's coming, and I know the commenters on YouTube, and I know Peter Bukowski haters are going to go, "Oh my God." The Lions are really good, and I still think they're the better team. I think they're better than the Packers, but I think this is a lot to overcome. Another short week, 3 games in 12 days, a lot of guys out. You mentioned Tucker Kraft and LaFleur loving to eat linebackers for lunch, and if it's David Long and Ezekiel Turner and Jamal Adams playing linebacker when he's never played linebacker before, I'm a little hesitant this week. I'm actually going to agree with you. Oh boy. And I'm going to say something like 34-31.
If someone from Locked On or Tegna is listening, can we make sure we get this clip?
I even wore the shirt. I mean, come on, I got the swag and everything. So yeah, I think Green Bay squeaks it out. I think it could be like a 34-31 type of thing, but I know I will be at Ford Field too, so I know what's coming when I get there. Just be nice when you see me, everybody.
I think what's going to happen, and I predicted this before. One of these fan bases is going to be furious that they didn't win this game. I think that's it's going to come down to 1 or 2 plays at the end, and I think the problem for the Lions is their defense is so banged up, and when Aaron Glenn, his whole thing is, you know, we can disguise and we can play fundamentally sound and all that stuff. The more you switch out pieces, that continuity it gets really, really hard. And the Packers are not having that issue right now. Jair Alexander has practiced for 3 straight days. Romeo Doubs has practiced 3 straight days. They're getting healthy at the right time. The Lions are going the other direction for teams that are pretty evenly matched. And I agree with you. The Lions, when they're fully healthy, are probably the better team. They're not fully healthy. So you have to play the game with the team you have. You got to dance with the girl that brung you, right? So I think that's ultimately why the Packers get this win, and we'll see in January if these two teams get a chance to do this again. I hope you and I get to do one more of these.
I have a weird feeling you guys are going to end up like the 6th seed or something, and then
divisional round,
and then obviously the lowest seed faces the 1 seed, and if the Lions are the 1 seed, I think they will be. We could be doing this all over again at Ford Field. We got to get you to Ford Field. What do you think? Can we make this happen?
Let's try. Let's try.
Call David Locke, call Ross Jackson. Let's
David,
go.
are you listening?
All right, my friend. Well, all the best. It's been great to see you. You've behaved again. We haven't fought. Nothing's happened. So we'll see what happens. Just stop with the trolling.
I won't. I will not.
Jeez. I mean, come on.
Lions fans are much harder to troll, I will say, than Vikings fans. Much easier to troll Vikings fans, Bears fans.
Here's another thing we can agree on. We got to keep Ben Johnson out of Chicago.
Yes. Well, they're not going to pay Ben Johnson. There's nothing about their history says that they are going to foot them. I said recently, I think if Ben Johnson wants the John Gruden, but half, like 5 years, 50, I think he'll get it. What Kyle Shanahan? I think Kyle Shanahan gets like $14 million a year. I think he could ask for that. I think he could ask for 4 years, 60 from someone, and I think they'd pay it, but it's not going to be in Chicago.
It's funny. Kevin Warren the other day, and he's a bit of a clown, said, "Oh, we're going to have the best job this offseason." What if Todd Bowles gets fired? That Tampa job's good. Like there's going to be some good jobs out there, better than the Bears job. The Bears never do any.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
There's nothing like a showdown in the AFC West. I basically said, hey, Chiefs and Chargers should both make the playoffs. I said, maybe there's a distant one. So far, so good. My predictions come true. There are 3 AFC West teams in the playoff hunt here, with Denver keeping themselves in it as well. Does that surprise you that these 2 teams are up top and there's 3 that could make the playoffs?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think the Broncos are definitely a little surprising. I don't know if I thought that 3 teams in the AFC West should make the playoffs and probably will make the playoffs just because of how bad the bottom of the AFC has been. You know, you have these teams who could keep potentially getting back into it with the Dolphins or the Bengals or these other teams, and they keep on losing and kind of separating themselves. And the Bengals, you know, win a weird game, the Jameis Winston special on Monday night with the most Jameis Winston stat line of all time, but did show some flaws in that defense for sure. Bo Nix, obviously ahead of schedule, I think, but I did think it would eventually be the Chargers and the Chiefs. And I think the nice thing for the Chargers is just like, it does feel like they're a little ahead of schedule at 8-4. Yes, a lot of that is beating bad teams, but like what a lot of Charger fans forget, it's like that's never been a given with this team, right? Like, and even with as you can see with the Chiefs, like it's not always easy and games are going to be close and you have to show in those late moments that you can come through. And the Chargers did that last week. They did it against the Bengals, and against the Ravens, they were kind of shown to be a tier below where the top teams in the AFC are when they're at their best. So I think for the Chargers to be 8-4 and to have this chance, right? Like this is a game I've had scheduled, you know, circled on the schedule for a while. The Chargers are 6-2 in their last 8, but nobody is going to give them the credit that they properly deserve unless they can go take this team down. This is the team. This is their last chance on the schedule to kind of get that statement win, to kind of have that Jim Harbaugh has arrived and he's ready to contend in the AFC West. Obviously, the Chiefs, all they do is win. But at least I think you feel like with Jim Harbaugh now, the Chargers are a real threat to be reckoned with. And I think the hard thing is like, this feels like a vulnerable Chiefs team. But like with the Chargers' flaws and what they showed last week, you want them so bad to be able to go take this in Arrowhead and win this game, but they have their flaws as well. And you know it's just going to be kind of a fight tooth and nail type of game.
And it's got to be the Titans of the division. They got to keep going. They are the top 2. So back to what you had said about Ladd McConkey. Running game, there's a whole lot of talk preseason that Jim Harbaugh is going to run the ball every damn play. Not going to be a problem. Okay. In reality, the run game has not taken over that much. The pass game is still very much alive. Quentin Johnson is probably your second option there. What do we need to know about if Ladd can't go? What does this offense look like?
Man, that's a great question. And I think a question a lot of Chargers fans in their, you know, deepest, darkest hours are wondering to themselves as they try to put themselves to sleep tonight, because Ladd McConkey was the entire offense last week. Like I've talked about on the show this week, he had 117 receiving yards. The rest of the Chargers skill position players had 88 combined. And a big part of that is because of the lack of identity that I think that has kind of realized itself in the running game. And it only gets tougher when you have someone like J.K. Dobbins hit IR, because even though it was a flawed running game, he was the best part of the Chargers' flawed running game, and at least he brought some explosiveness potentially to it, where he could be having a bad game. He could be 10 for 28, but then break off a 40-yard run, and it's like, okay, well, that's why you keep feeding him. That's why you do it. And I think with this game, if you look, Quentin Johnston, out of the last 3 games, 4 catches on 17 targets. They've tried to make him the secondary option for this team, but that's not going to cut it, right? And he did have the big high-profile game against the Ravens, 0 for 5 on 5 targets, 3 big drops, and you saw that confidence spiral out of control. And I think the big thing with Quentin Johnson now is if he can be more than just a guy that catches drag routes, because as they keep giving him opportunities down the field to make big plays, he's just not that receiver. He's not a receiver that's going to play through the contact, play through a defensive back, get you flags even when he can't come down with the completions. That's not what his game is right now. You really have to scheme it up for Quentin Johnson to be successful. Josh Palmer is a guy we've seen do it in spurts. That hasn't really realized itself. And I think when you have a guy like Gus Edwards, you say, hey, there is a strategy here. You pound Gus Edwards in December in the cold, you wear that Kansas City good run defense down, and maybe you can start getting some results in the second half where you have been a really bad second half team offensively. But even last week, Gus Edwards averaged more than 5 yards per carry. Still in the second half, they get away from it, and they're not as committed to it because they just can't stay on the football field. They only had 4 drives in the second half last week, and they only had 2 first downs. So it's hard to really pound the rock and make it count and wear a defense down if you're not going to stick with it. But this Chargers offense has been so inconsistent, and the drives just haven't been there for them to be able to give them that kind of pull to get a sense of whether or not this can actually be a legitimate running offense that, if you need them to, if Ladd McConkey can't play, can carry you for a week or at least keep you in a game.
I personally love the fact that we're talking about the run game in the AFC West. It's been a while, right? So
yeah,
back to how they should attack the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs' run defense has been great for the majority of the year, but the last 2 ball games, they've started to slip a little bit. And so that becomes, I think, the focal point. If you're trying to protect the quarterback on the Chiefs side, and you're trying to deal with maybe a lack of weapons on the offense on the Chargers side, do you think this could turn into a run fest?
It does feel like it could be kind of a street fight, bar fight, kind of drag out run fest for both of these teams. Because, I mean, I think if you're looking for where you attack the Chargers defense, it's definitely in the run game, right? I mean, last week they did a good enough job against Bijan later on, but he, in that first quarter, it looked like he was going to run for about $180 in that game and score 3 touchdowns. And that's what happened to them the week before against Derrick Henry, where they just couldn't stop anything. And that lack of physicality that they weren't able to bring to that game really showed up in a big way. And I think for the Chargers, hey, if you can get that run game going, like if Gus Edwards can have that breakout game, the game you've kind of been waiting from him all season long, you're going to give yourself a good chance, and you're going to take some of the pressure that's on this offense right now because nobody is respecting the run. And when you have last week and guys aren't getting open in the second half, you have no semblance of a running game. It's going to look like it did, and they should have got goose-egged. They should have got shut out in the second half of the last game, but the defense gets a pick 6 and kind of bailed them out a little bit. But man, if Gus Edwards can get it going, like if he can be that physical guy that can actually get 15 to 20 carries this week and have a good game where 3 out of his last 4 games has actually averaged over 5 yards per carry, you might be able to do something here. But it's just so hard to kind of have the faith that they can do it. But hey, there's a path there. We just haven't really seen it enough to have confidence in it.
And, in Kansas City, the offense is always worried about the pass rush, always. Because we know that the default is throw the ball with Mahomes, but few teams in the league can come after them like the Chargers can. And in history, we know that there's plenty of plays to be had out there if they can get that matchup. The left tackle spot is obviously troublesome, but they've also had some trouble with penalties, offsides in particular, and not lining up in the backfield with their right tackles. If you had to pick a matchup, which do you think is right now where they want to put all their eggs in a basket?
Yeah, it has to be the pass rush, and it has to be getting to Mahomes. Like, obviously, with Patrick Mahomes, it's never just about rushing the passer, and I think that's one of the most underrated parts of his game is just like you always have to be worried that he can get out, and if you send everyone, there's a chance he slips out of it, and there's a 40-yard play down the field. So you do have to kind of rein yourself in a little bit, which isn't good for the Chargers. The nice thing about last week is they had Kirk Cousins, who was an absolute statue, so it's like, hey, go eat. Pick that matchup, find the weakest part of that offensive line, and just get after it. But it has to start there. It has to be with whoever the Chiefs are starting at left tackle. Even if it's Joe Thuney, okay, hey, maybe then you attack his guard spot, whoever's replacing them there, and you see if that is the chink in the armor. But it is about pass rush. If the Chargers let him sit back there, he is going to tear them apart. And we've seen it happen against the Bengals. We saw it happen against the Ravens. If the pass rush isn't getting home, the Chargers defense is susceptible. And even though they've had really, really good numbers, it can kind of fall apart in a hurry to where, against the Bengals, it should have been 5 scoring drives in a row. Against the Ravens, it was 5 scoring drives in a row and 4 touchdowns. The Falcons last week should have started with 3 scoring drives in a row, and Kirk Cousins had a terrible pick, and Younghoe Koo missed a field goal. It's stopping those. Like, that's how you get out of that. If another team scored back-to-back times, that one timely sack can get you that stop that you need. And we've seen with Patrick Mahomes, there are actual offensive line that can be susceptible to that. So I think going into it, that is easily the biggest matchup. It's like, hey, we trust our guys in the back end against that receiving core. Obviously, you have to give DeAndre Hopkins special attention. You know what Travis Kelce has always done against the Chargers, even in a lower year for him, a down year for him. You're always afraid of that, and he's always going to keep you up at night. But it's finding that weakness on the offensive line and trying to exploit it as many times as you can.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. You can always turn a profit on a game between 2 sub-500 teams if you want. The Pacers head to Brooklyn to take on the Nets and are slight favorites. FanDuel has Indiana laying 2 points for tonight's tilt, if you want to call it that. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Kirk Cousins returns to U.S. Bank Stadium. Things are going great for you guys over there, right, with him?
Yeah, real great, Luke.
Great. Welcome to Locked On Crossover.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
So you kind of mentioned a little bit, Aaron, about your envisioned path to victory. We can build like the path to the Falcons winning this game. It's that Kirk Cousins comes in, super fired up. He plays lights out. He's dialed in. He's hitting things in rhythm over the middle of the field, like vintage Kirk, like Kirk was doing right before he got hurt in Minnesota. Like we were kind of, our last memory of him was him in this like total all cylinders mode. He gets the ball out to Bijan Robinson, who can't be tackled. Defensively, the Falcons are able to get some pressure on them. I think the Vikings have a weak spot in their interior for sure. They're figuring out what they want to do at right guard. They've got Dalton Reisner in there right now. He's been, we'll go with shaky. Blake Brandel is also kind of a week-to-week proposition. So both the guards, you're attacking that. You're hitting them up the middle. Like that feels like the path to victory for the Falcons. Do I have that?
Yeah. I mean, when I look at the 3 keys, you pretty much nailed it. You got to have some answers for Brian Flores, and we'll see what interesting wrinkles Zach Robinson can come up with. I think pressuring Sam Darnold is a big part. They had some success last week. They had 5 sacks, and previously they had like 10 sacks for the entire season. So maybe that's a trend that can continue, especially with the interior. I liked some of the blitzes that Arizona was throwing at Minnesota, and I want to see some of that aggressiveness. And then we talked about it earlier with the turnovers. Right, Aaron Jones fumbleitis the last couple of weeks. We have some defenders on the Falcons defense, Nate Landman, Jesse Bates, that are really good at punching the ball out. And then hopefully that pressure and whatnot, you can get Sam Darnold to make some mistakes, force some throws into, Justin Jefferson or whatever, and maybe AJ Terrell or Jesse Bates, does his usual cheating on it and jumps those throws and they get some turnovers. And as you say, capitalize on that with touchdowns as opposed to field goals.
Yeah, like really be able to move the ball. One thing about the Vikings I should mention, they hold the ball a long time. And part of that, Sam Darnold, sometimes he's slower on his progressions until he dials in and then he gets the ball out quick and then it gets really lethal. But sometimes it's, play action, 7-step drop, wait for a post to come open. He stands back there forever and then the offensive line can only block for so long. So that's where the pressure can come in and the strip sack stuff and sort of these like super swingy plays that bring it. I think there's an opportunity. I don't know. On the other side, if you were to be on the Vikings looking for the best possible way to ensure a victory against the Falcons, how would you draw it out?
I'd throw I'd beat Brian Flores and I just throw a lot of blitzes at him because Kirk's not going to be able to move. So if we want him to, get the ball out quickly and clamp down on those underneath throws and whatnot, and force him to, hit those hot reads that, as you say, has been inconsistent hitting, that would be one strategy for that.
And then basically, with the defense, if the Falcons going to play their bend but don't break style of defense, like we're going to have a field day. Just pick and choose. Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, Justin Jefferson. They're going to be open all game. So just it's just basically like do whatever you want to do. Aaron Jones, get him out in the flat, let him do some things. So you have a pick your poison type of offense if the Falcons are going to play that sort of soft coverage. So we'll see if they decide to sort of be a little bit more aggressive in their game plan like they were last week against the Chargers. But like that's kind of where I feel like you have options that you can win. Theoretically, Justin Simmons had a good game against TJ Hawkinson last year when he was with the Broncos, covering him. We haven't really seen a Justin Jefferson. We haven't. He was hurt last year. But Jordan Addison had a good game in that game. Hawkinson had a good game
since his rookie year, then, huh? Which was I think the first Raheem Morris game. The interim head coach.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
But Kirk threw like 3 picks in that game, didn't he?
Yeah, it was one of the worst Kirk Cousins games of his time in Minnesota.
Yeah. How was he with the next week, Luke?
Oh, gosh. I don't think he was bad. I don't remember. No, he went into a bye, and then they came out and beat the 2021 or 2020 Packers NFC Championship. Like they were like 14-2 that year, and we were one of the 2. They went into Lambeau and won that game, and then he like pulled it together.
Okay, well, all right.
Needed the bye to relax on that one, but that's what I'm saying. Like this absolutely, like the second you think you've got him pegged. He's going to do something that you didn't think he was going to do anymore. You cannot be a prisoner of the moment with Kirk Cousins. You'll be wrong a lot. A question I had on one of the things you said there with the blitzes and Kirk Cousins being like a statue in the pocket, right? We're very familiar with that, but how are the tackles, especially the left tackle around the blind side? Because sometimes you can get a strip sack that way. And the Vikings' main source of pressure, if it's not, unblocked blitzer or whatever, linebacker beating the running back, it's Jonathan Grenard off the edge and Andrew Van Ginkel off the edge. Those two guys have been playing Pro Bowl level football. So if the Vikings are, and they can probably isolate the tackles, maybe you get chip help, but you can, that also sort of contracts your offense in a way the Vikings would be happy with. So how are the tackles? Can they handle those challenges?
It'll be interesting because Jake Matthews typically struggles against power. If you just bull rush him, you can sort of collapse the pocket. Caleb McGarry typically struggles against speed. So if you just, try to bend the edge.
So we got a power guy and a speed guy. So that's fascinating.
So like you have an opportunity if you can get those guys matched up. McGarry's been a little bit more susceptible to power this year because he's been dealing with a knee injury. And so he just doesn't have as strong a base. So you can kind of go through him before now than you could before. So the tackle play has not been a major issue, but at times it'll show up. There's been a bunch of times the last couple of weeks, especially, where they will give up a pressure at the inopportune time, and that will lead to a Kirk Cousins fumble. Fortunately for the Falcons, they've recovered a lot of those fumbles, but he has fumbled the ball quite a bit this year because of,
he'll
him
do
not
that.
being able to move in the pocket and all that stuff.
Yeah. And the way I don't know if he's changed this. This is something he said in a clinic like 5 years ago. But the way that he approaches the front, he will usually do all of his protection work pre-snap. He'll look at the front. He'll identify what the blocking assignments all should be. So if something unexpected happens, he often will not pay attention. Like he is specifically chosen to focus on reading the coverage and reading out his concepts and like dedicate all his mental energy to that and all of his mental time to that in the pocket and essentially just like eat it if something unexpected comes and he gets hit blindside or something like that. He's just chosen to risk that. So he takes a ton. Like if you ever get an unblocked blindside blitzer, he'll just eat that thing. Like he'll just take it and not see it coming at all. And that's how you get crazy strip sacks. And that was a thing for him all the time. And it's like a decision he would defend if you grilled him on it. But obviously that's an opportunity. He just thinks it's worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. We've seen a little bit of that this year.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like this has just become the Kirk Cousins episode, but that's probably appropriate.
Well, it's all we're talking about in Locked On Falcons. So,
Yeah. I mean, that's the topic is like, oh, Kirk Cousins coming back. Is he going to get booed? I don't think he'll get, if you hear boos, there'll be maybe like some faint ones, but you'll probably hear mostly just the crowd getting loud because it's the first time the opposing defense gets on the field. And then obviously, the other team always gets booed when they first run out of the tunnel, but that's got nothing to do with who they are.
I really think Kirk's injury really helped his brand in Minnesota. That it was like you started to miss Kirk after you watched those 9 games of not Kirk Cousins in Minnesota last year. So I think it really
Dobbs sanity was fun, and you of all people should know that.
I don't know what you're talking about, Luke. I don't know. Josh Dobbs? Who's that? Who?
We love that guy forever. But it also helped that he went out on like 2 of his best games, like the San Francisco Monday Night Football, beating, upsetting the eventual Super Bowl 49ers. And then going into Lambeau and just dunking on the Packers before he tears his Achilles. It was like, God, he was just figuring it out, as though that wasn't going to crater like it always does after October. But I digress.